Boom, and we're here. Hello, and welcome to this edition of Motivation and Money with me, Mark Terrell, and my co-host, Fanny Snaith. How are you today, Fanny?
Excellent. Thank you. Enjoying the sunshine. It's very nice.
Fabulous.
Mm.
Excellent. Looks like
Sun.
we've got some viewers already. That's great. Good start, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
It's been a couple of weeks. Anything exciting happening in your world in the last couple of weeks, Fanny?
Uh, oh, so much
So
has
much.
been, so much goes on. I've been on long walks, which is really nice.
Hmm?
Preparing for my new course and webinars and all the just lots of things. You've got me
Put
on
you
the hop
on the
there.
hop. Yeah, well, I know there's lots of things going on in your life. So that's all good. It's busy time, isn't it? Lots of exciting things going on in the world. And anyway, so the title of or the topic for today's discussion, which is obviously linked to motivation and money, is what's the mistake that's driven you, essentially, something like that. What's the mistake that's had the biggest impact on you? I think that's exactly what I said.
Hmm.
And I think, well, if I kick off the sort of the reason why I thought this might be a good topic is that I think we're driven by a lot of our mistakes is what businesses are started around. One of the things I started my business around is helping my clients not to make the same mistakes as I made. And if you don't know what that mistake is, essentially the mistake I made was that just joining a family business and taking just the next thing that was offered to me and not thinking about actually, is that right for me? And so just going down a path which was just put in front of you as opposed to choosing your own path, making sure that you do make your own decisions, making sure that the next step in your career or in your business is right for you and not what just somebody else has decided for you. So that's very much linked to motivation being the thing that is important to you, the thing that drives you. Make sure that's always being fulfilled in your role when you're running a business, and obviously when you come to a career, making sure that the next step is likely to still continue to fulfill those things, and making sure that it doesn't become a problem to you. And that was my biggest mistake, was to allow that to happen. So
I think you've sort of really cast that off rather swiftly, Mark. Whereas I think, bearing in mind that you
mm,
came up with this topic, I think you should let us know a bit more about that because
yeah.
I think that that's such a common thing to have happen. And indeed, when I say mine, it's not going to be too far different from yours.
Mhm.
So when you say you just took something and didn't think about something, what did all that, tell us a bit, why don't you tell us a bit more about that?
So because of the way I was quite innovative and brought new ideas into the business. And when you're like that, then people that sort of puts out a certain signal, doesn't it? It's sort of, well, he likes to sort of take charge. Is that what he likes to do? But actually, it wasn't that. It wasn't because I was desperate to be in charge. I was actually always looking to to ways in which way we can improve the running of the business, how we can get more out of the business, how we can serve our customers better. And I was the one that brought technology into our retail business. I'm the one that introduced it, but it wasn't easy to introduce that technology, because especially when it's you that's pushing it, and you have to persuade everybody.
Mm.
It's a tricky place to be, but I mean, I managed to get over that. So I guess I showed leadership in respect to getting that in, and I believed in it and made it work, even though there was doubters. And we're always going to get doubters in our world, whatever we do. But it's realizing that the actions that other people see can be perceived in a different way than they actually are intended. So what was perceived was that because I was innovative, creative, brought new ideas in, that I was the natural person to be in charge of the business going forward. So in other words, taking the MD role,
Mm.
so managing people become the main thing, the main role in that business for me,
Yeah.
and that's what I spent most of my time doing, which I was quite capable of doing. There was no reason why I couldn't do it. I had the skills to do it, but actually I didn't want to do it, essentially. And so if you're doing something a lot of the time which you don't want to do, you start to get resentment builds up. You
Hmm.
don't put your heart into it. You don't feel as if you're doing something that's actually fulfilling. And can you ever really perform well from that position? Even with all the skills in the world, being every single course in the world to do whatever it is you're doing, if you don't really want to do it, are you ever going to be good at it? And are you ever going to be the right person for that role? And I would probably suggest not. So it's realizing that role and making sure that the thing that you do fulfills you in your business, and you
Yeah.
don't have to be MD.
So how did you get out of it? How
Well, I ended up
did
selling my business. Essentially, that's what happened. I was given a way out. I was just getting on with it and doing it. But
so
when you come out of it, you then have time to reflect and say, well, what were the things that I should have done? You don't know immediately what those are, but when you start then thinking about or going on courses and start learning stuff that you wish you'd known, then you think, well, actually, this is what I needed to know. This is what I should have taken on board when I was making that decision to step up and be MD or whatever it is, whatever the title. And then so you think, well, I can use this. I want to use this to help my clients to
yeah,
make better decisions.
yeah,
So
that's very interesting. That's interesting. So I suppose the next question has to be that when you sold your business and you came out of your business, were there any regrets? Because so, like for instance, okay, it could have been possible that you took another role in the business that you were happy with. Was that were there any kind of regrets on that front? I mean, did you see that the only out was to sell the business, and then when you did
uh,
the course afterwards, there could have been other alternatives?
I think again, when you have time to reflect, you think, well, what could I've done? What could I've done differently?
Yeah,
Maybe I could have just looked at my role differently. Just realised. So now that I've done all the work with motivation and understand the role that plays. So
yeah,
I know that the things that motivate me are creativity, innovation, making a difference,
yeah,
and being an expert in what I do. So being a specialist and having the knowledge to do it well.
yeah,
So I could have used that knowledge of those three motivators, and think, well, I can reframe what I do and actually realize actually I do make a difference because I
yeah,
need, I help. We had countless 16-year-olds that joined the business. And then when they got to 18, they went on to university, and they were completely different people in that 2-year period. They grew as people, and
yeah,
I know that's making a massive difference to people, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's actually remembering to just take a step back sometimes and say, well, actually, what is this I'm actually doing here? Am I
yeah,
running a business, or is it more than that? And
mm,
most often, it is more than just running a business. You're impacting everyone that touches your business, whether it's customers, your employees, suppliers. All those people are impacted by the way that you run your business and the way you interact with them. And it's bearing that in mind, and having a way of doing that so that you stick to your values, and obviously that's an important part of it as
yeah,
well, realizing what your values are and sticking to them, because when you don't stick to your values, ultimately that makes you feel a bit sort of under under par, I suppose. Yeah,
interesting.
so that's me. So are you ready to share your big mistake that's
Well, I
driven
think
you?
I think to be honest, my if I look generally back over my life, I mean, I could name some investment mistakes that I've made, you know.
Yeah.
But being unattached to the outcome, I'm not going to say that they've necessarily affected my life because I wouldn't have made them in the first place. So I can't really say that. I made a couple of cock ups at work, which were quite sort of like they were quite big ones at the time, and they taught me how to process situations going forward. So that again was a plus.
Mhm.
I remember working for a market research company, and I was running the telephone centre. So 45 booths full of researchers, and we were running a couple of surveys that night. One of them was to speak to people who had bought Porsches cars, and we'd been given a load of telephone numbers by the Porsche dealers. And then the other one was people who bought avocados, of all things, and they'd had to fill in a little label on the back of these avocados, and they sent them in, and then we were phoning them up and asking them questions about avocados.
Wow.
And my supervisors, of which I had about 5 or 6 supervisors, the supervisors on this job were coming to me and they go, "We're just not getting any interviews, Fanny. We're just not getting any interviews." And I was going, "It's all right, it's all right." And I was stressed, and I was like going, not stressed, but like I cast them aside. I didn't listen to them properly. And more time passed, and until the penny dropped, where the people who were supposed to be being asked questions about avocados were being asked questions about their recent Porsche purchase. People and the people who just bought Porsches were being asked about avocados. So I got the sample mixed up, right? So
Oops.
yeah, oops, and it's money, right? It's difficult to phone these people back and say, I was asking you about avocados. What I really meant to do was ask you about Porsches, and not everybody who's a telephone interviewer has the ability to do that in a sort of like a light-hearted way as well. It's like a big deal to them. Anyway, so it was quite a cock up, but it taught me how to listen a little bit more and also approach my boss in the best way to tell him that I'd cocked up. But moving on from that, because that was sort of, I'm going to put myself out there and I'm going to say, I think one of the biggest mistakes that I have made that has affected me life in a lot of my life is lack of self-care. How about that?
Yeah.
I wish that I had looked after myself better, like personal development, physically, mentally, and all that kind of stuff a lot earlier than I started to do. In fact, I was sort of like forced into looking after myself well, really, just by sort of going at things hammer and tongs. And I think that that's one of the things that I love to help people with, even though I focus on money and life. But so much of what goes on around money as well is about self-care, because how you think about yourself when it comes to money. I mean, even when I started my business as a money coach and was just thinking about helping people with their practical finances, which I was brilliant at, by the way. That was my forte, but I was doing it because I wanted to amass a load of wealth because I was terrified of being poor, which is not looking after my own well-being either, because it's all coming from terror. And then even when I went to the Money Coaching Institute to learn about people's relationships with money, first of all, I tended to focus on what I was learning that I could help other people with rather than going through the process myself. And it took a while for me to suddenly go, Fanny, you just have to stop here and do your own stuff.
Yeah.
And bearing in mind that I'm going to be 58 this year, even though I don't even think like a 58-year-old or even feel anything
And obviously
like.
don't look anything like a
Of
50-year-old
course
either.
not.
58.
Of course not.
No.
It would have been nice to have done it a bit earlier. I would have started my business earlier. I would have done a lot of things earlier. It's not that I'm going to regret it, because I'm not, because I've still got many years left of wonderful life. But yeah, I think that's probably the one that's had the biggest impact on me.
I think that's really interesting you said that, actually. I wasn't quite expecting that, but yeah, it's great. I mean, I think we all have that sort of realization that actually, we're responsible for all our decisions. And I think one of the things you realize also is that it's no good blaming anybody. We sooner or later, we just have to accept that, we have to make our own decisions. And when we look back, we're obviously guided. We as human beings are pretty useless when we're born, so we rely on people to guide us and show us the way and all that sort of stuff. And we can only go on that information that we're taught. So,
exactly.
but once you're sort of cast to a point where you are not influenced by that initial influence, then you start have to make your own decisions. You do, I think, naturally start questioning what you've been told, and because only that. Well, I think one of the things that I think about now is that people can only tell you and talk about what they've experienced. They can't tell you about what they haven't experienced. So whenever anybody gives you advice, it's only based on what they've done and what they've experienced, and that's the context you should take it in.
Absolutely, absolutely. However, I think, I mean, it is interesting though, because when you think about some of the things that we're taught, And the reason I find this an easy topic to talk about, because so often it is linked to money. Like, you've got to work really, really hard. You've got, in order to earn more money, you've got to work really hard. Well, that's just absolutely not true. It isn't,
Yeah.
because when you think about people who work exceptionally hard, there are loads of people out there who work really hard who don't get paid that well.
Yeah.
Care workers, teachers, NHS workers
Yeah.
work their rocks off,
Yeah.
or show their socks. But there are things that we grow up believing that are just not true. And again, it's like looking at the newspaper, looking at the television, looking at all this stuff that's out there at the moment. I mean, and just immersing yourself in it and going, oh my goodness, the world's in such a terrible place and everything's really, really awful. Whereas actually there are so many opportunities out there, and it's about making decisions for ourselves and changing our paths to actually move forward. I mean, I'll give you another example, right? So I know we've talked about this before. My intention when I was 10 years old, coming from fear, was that I was going to be a millionaire. That was my intention that I set. I had no plan, no strategy, but that was my intention. That's what I was going to do. A bit like law of attraction, going, universe, this is what's going to happen to me, right? So I put all the building blocks in my brain to say that that is the situation that I was going to be in when I was older. And I just subconsciously focused on it. When it happened and I realized that it didn't make me happy, what was funny was, looking back at it, I didn't replace it with another goal. I didn't replace it with another intention. And I drifted. I drifted for quite some time. I became what I think, I've heard, I don't know, this phrase is quite well known, financial drifter. And it's awful. So I can experience what it's like as well, not to have that clarity and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, got that. Everything's fine. Should be sitting here on a beach going, everything's amazing, but it wasn't, because I sort of ended up drifting again. It's very interesting, and that's part of self-care.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you mentioned the £1 million thing, because I've just not long had a conversation with someone who set an intention to have a business that was going to turn over £1 million a year.
Lovely.
And it was only when somebody sat him down and say, well, why is it that you want a business that turns over £1 million? And he couldn't really answer, was that he suddenly realised that he was setting a goal that sounded good, but actually it wasn't something that he really wanted.
No.
And so it was resetting and thinking, well, actually, what is it that I really want? And how am I going to make that happen, rather than just creating something that really was just a number, and that's it. And when you set those sort of goals, when you set a goal to say, well, when I've got that, there is that, well, what happens next thing, isn't it? It's like say golfers when they get to number one. I mean, where do you go after you get to number one? Some would say, well, only down. There's nowhere else you can go. But actually, it's thinking about, well, how can I create more? And the golfers that I see that have really sort of took it on to the next level is those that have started academies and started to spread what they've done and help people to get to where they've got to, or some way along the way. It's when people connect to that purpose that's really valuable, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the Italian MotoGP. Do you know him?
Yeah.
God, he won it for years.
Valentino Rossi.
Valentino Rossi, right? So good old Valentino Rossi.
Yeah.
I love Valentino Rossi. So you say, when you get to the top, where do you go? Because I mean, he's won the MotoGP for what? How many years? I'm very, very happy. And so you say, where do they go? Well, let's look at what he did. He changed bikes. So he went on to different motorbikes. He had fun, just had fun with it and all that kind of stuff. And just, there are plenty of places to go.
But he's created an academy, a team,
Has it?
VR46, that bring in, and they're in Moto 3, which is the sort of, as far as MotoGP comes, that's sort of the feeder in. There's the Moto 3, then they move up to Moto 2, which is the sort of 600 600 CTs, and then ultimately and they might get to MotoGP when it gets to sort of 1,000cc motorbike. So that's what he's done, was really actually, I want to give something back to
Yeah.
to the sport that has given me so much.
So going back to these mistakes then,
Yeah.
how can we help people then to, like, if people, anybody who's watching this, how can we help people to try and, because sometimes we don't always have a mistake that just smacks us in the face, do we?
No.
It's something that happens great. And I think what you were describing happened to you gradually. You almost got to the, it sounds like you got to the end of your tether and went, right, I'm selling the business.
Well, what happened to me was the sort of boiling frogs sort of scenario. Are you familiar with that? So if you're watching this and you're not familiar with it, legend has it that if you drop a frog into a pan of boiling water, it will jump straight out because the sensors on its skin will save it and it'll jump out. If you put a frog into tepid water and then heat it, by the time it realizes what's going on, it's too late and the frog will perish. It's not able to detect what's coming around him, or hit her, I should say. So that's what happened to me. Was it sort of just crept up on me. I mean, going back to, putting ourselves first. I didn't put myself first. I didn't think about what I needed. I didn't think about those things, and which you shared, which is really important. Is putting yourself first so that you're in the best place. A bit like, fitting your own oxygen mask before you help others. You need to be the best person you could be to give other people the best things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can't remember what the question was, but yeah, that's.
Well, no, the question was how do we help people to not have, because the mistakes don't slap us in the face always, right? The frog thing always gets me, because I just wonder, has anybody tested it? Not.
I'm not sure it's really ethically right to actually test the scenario, but I think we all can relate to that scenario, can't we?
Because the thing is, right, I read on LinkedIn every day now. LinkedIn's getting more and more less business as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm seeing so many posts over like things like, I was working really, really hard and then I had a burnout and I had a breakdown and now I'm feeling so much better because I've come through this and I'm a stronger person for it and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of young people posting about being drinkers or non-drinkers, which I think is really interesting.
Right.
So if I was looking back at my past and thinking about how I felt about myself, my confidence, self-love, and on self-care and all that kind of stuff, I would probably put my hand on my heart, quite honestly, and say, it, like you, it just sort of, it creeps up on you because it's your normal, right? It's like if you come from a family that's abusive, divorce, all these kind of stuff, it's your normal. That's what it feels like. So how do we spot these things? How can we actually spot them earlier? So if I was talking about my early self, my family used to call me a drama queen. They used to call me, I don't know, all sorts of things, that I was like always the one to create the trouble and all that. So actually, I was desperate on the inside, looking back on it now, as to try and change normal, right? Change my normal. And part of me goes back and I go, I wish I'd continued down that path rather than gone, oh my God, they think I'm a drama queen, I better shut up and sit in the corner. Those kind of things.
Yeah.
So how do we spot them earlier? How do we not allow things to creep up on us like it did in your job? And how do we not allow normal, where your inner child, let's use that one, your inner voice is screaming at you to do something about it?
I suppose it boils down to making conscious decisions, but again, this brings questions in how do you make conscious decisions when you can only base your decisions on what's happening to you and the people that are influencing you. So I think us wise ones that have got to a certain age can reflect more because we've had the experience, we've been down that road, we've had the experience, so we can help people not make those mistakes, but realizing that however much we tell people, we can't expect them to take everything on board and do exactly as we say, and that probably would be the wrong thing to do anyway. Do exactly as we say. We can
Do as
only share.
I
Huh?
say.
Well,
Do as
people,
I say. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think but it's telling the message. I think that we should be giving people is to say, well, you can make your own decisions based on the information you've got to hand, but be open-minded and realize that like I said earlier, anybody that gives you advice can only give the advice based on their own experiences. They can't do it other than that. um, so
Yeah.
you have to make conscious decisions and realize that there's positive and negative in most decisions. You've got to take the ups and the downs, and realizing that things, when they don't go to plan, it's not failure. It's just you've just learned a lesson, and you'll learn from it, and you can grow from that. And obviously that comes down to mindset. The
Mm.
growth and fixed mindset scenario. Staying in that growth mindset is a key thing, I think. Carol Dweck's book about mindset.
Yeah.
Have you read that one?
Yeah. I read
Yeah.
it. I didn't like the sport bit in the middle.
You what? Sorry.
I didn't like the sport bit in the middle, but I
Oh
liked the
right.
book. It was
Okay.
really interesting. And I think every parent of young children or expectant parents should get your hands on it and just read the bloody thing, like read
Yeah.
it, and take it in. Because I think if I'd known then what I know now from that book, a lot of things have changed. But
Mm.
going on down all that route, do you know what I think? I think that every single person should be encouraged to have to take time for themselves. And I know that we say it, go out for a walk or do something. It's like, no, everybody deserves and should. I'm going to use the word should. You must book in a time for yourself to allow you to investigate, to explore your self-trust.
Yeah.
Because I think self-trust is a huge thing. Because one of the conflicts that I think that we all get within ourselves, which can lead us to mistakes or lead us to wherever, is having the conflict which causes emotional stress, dis-ease, which is generally where what you really your inner person is actually saying to you, you're not doing the right thing here, you're not doing the right thing here, this is not right, you're feeling uncomfortable, this isn't feeling good, you're not doing the right thing. Listen, because I don't think we do. And I notice it all the time when I'm coaching people and just talking to people generally, and they go, oh my God, you're never going to believe what I did this week. I did X, Y, and Z. Why did I do that? I mean, it's just so silly. Anyway, because I did that, I then had to do this, and the other. They've missed the whole point because there was a question that came out in the middle of there. Why did I do that? And I don't think we hardly ever stop and go, so why did I do that?
Yeah.
And I think that's when we start to learn about ourselves, because we just cast it aside. We live on this sort of low level thinking quite a lot of the time, whereas so many of these occasions, and I know it would have certainly helped me,
Mm.
that if I'd stopped and just risen myself above, vertical thinking rather than horizontal thinking, and looked at the situation from back and go, no, that's wrong. No, you're right to say that you don't enjoy doing that. And yes, you can do something about that. And actually, fingers up to everybody else. You go and do what you want to do, girl. But I didn't do it.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people out there that don't do the same.
Yeah.
Or do the same.
Absolutely. A great synopsis, a great summing up of what we should all be taking on board. Thank you, Fanny. I think it's what Adrian Chase sometimes joins us on these, and he talks about being selfish. So we
Yeah.
all need to learn to be selfish. So we do things for ourselves, and for that reason, it's a good thing. And it's one thing, if you think about it, it's something that's drummed into us when we're kids, that's not to be selfish.
Selfish.
But actually, it's one of the things that we need to learn to be when we're older. We need to be all our lives in some way selfish, to look after ourselves and learn how to give ourselves the things that make us happy.
Yeah.
So there we are. So sadly, we run out of time again, Fanny. Do you want to just talk about you're doing your money makeover again? Do you want to just mention that again?
Oh yeah. So I'm starting the fantastic, fabulous money makeover course again on July the 6th. It's a 10-week fully guided program to change you and your money life. So if you feel that you don't really have much confidence around money, you're not happy with your financial situation, you're challenged as to how you can earn more, you're challenged in managing your money, how you view yourself with money, come and join us. It's fantastic. I'm hosting a webinar tonight, 21st of June. I'm going to do another one on the 29th of June and another one on the 4th of July in the run up to starting. I'll post some links in the comments. But yeah, do come along. I think, look, all this stuff going on in the news, it's easy to get submersed in it and feel down and things are awful. There's no doubt that we're going to have a really big financial squeeze if we're not having it already. We can do stuff about it, but sitting there and blaming Boris and blaming everything else and all that kind of stuff isn't going to help. Just need to take some action, change who we are when it comes to money, and allow ourselves to become financially successful.
Brilliant.
And I like that.
Lovely, lovely, jubbly. For me, I've mentioned the Motivated Business Club, and also I've got some online courses which you'll find on my website, which will come up at the end. And one that I think is my one of the jewels in the crown is what I call How to Be a High Flyer, and it's something that it's about self-leadership essentially. If you want to progress and learn how to deal with the things that are being thrown at us, then that course is for you. If you're not really in a leadership position, you just need to know how to lead your life and your work in a better way. Then how to become a high flyer is the course.
So how to be a high flyer.
How to become a high flyer.
I'm guessing what you teach them to do is how to find their own wings.
Something like that. Indeed. Yes, indeed. So if that sounds interesting, then you find it on my website, and the website address is coming up at the end of the show. So thank you, Fanny, for another action-packed 30 minutes. Looking forward to the next time. I can't make next week because I'm flying away somewhere. I'm carrying away the flying thing.
Yeah, cool.
So without further ado, it's goodbye from me.
And it's good night from him.
See you all next time.